I often have patients in my office, people in their 40s and 50s, who are diligent about their health. They exercise, they eat well, and they tell me, "Doc, I'm not a big drinker. I just have one glass of red wine with dinner. It's good for the heart, right?" For years, the medical community and even official dietary guidelines gave a quiet nod to this idea. But as a physician, I have to tell you that this perspective is now dangerously obsolete. In 2023, the World Health Organization issued a statement that fundamentally changed our understanding. It was a complete reversal, clarifying that there is no safe amount of alcohol that does not negatively impact our health.
If you're enjoying this, subscribe.
To put this in clinical perspective, alcohol, specifically ethanol, is now classified as a Group 1 carcinogen. This isn't a minor warning. This is the highest risk category, the same classification we give to asbestos, radiation, and formaldehyde. The reason for this is uncompromisingly biological. The damage doesn't start after the fifth drink, or after years of heavy consumption. The risk of cellular damage begins with the very first drop. Today, I'm going to explain exactly how this happens inside your brain, why the idea of healthy drinking is a myth, and what the clinical evidence truly shows. Let me show you what's happening inside your body the moment you take that first sip. That initial feeling of relaxation, of loosening up after a drink, isn't a positive social lubricant. From a neurological standpoint, it's a symptom of brain suppression. Think of your brain's prefrontal cortex as the CEO of your entire personality. It's the sophisticated, energy-intensive region responsible for executive function, impulse control, long-term planning, and social appropriateness. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant that selectively targets this CEO first. The relaxation you feel is the CEO being put to sleep. Your brain's top-down inhibition, the very process that stops you from saying the wrong thing at the wrong time or making a risky decision, is systematically shut down. This is why personality shifts are the first sign of acute impairment. You aren't becoming more yourself, your brain is simply losing the neural circuitry required to foresee consequences. But this temporary shutdown has a lasting physical cost. The brain is made of two main types of tissue. There's the gray matter. These are the computer processors, the actual neurons that do the thinking, storing memories, and making calculations. Then there's the white matter. This is the brain's internal Ethernet cabling, the insulated wiring that allows all those processors to communicate with each other at high speed. As we'll see, alcohol wages a war on both fronts, physically degrading the computers and fraying the wires. So, how does an enjoyable drink translate into physical damage to your brain's hardware? The aha moment in this story comes when we follow the ethanol molecule after you swallow it. As your liver and body metabolize alcohol, they convert it into a new molecule called acetaldehyde. And this is the true villain of the story. Acetaldehyde is a potent neurotoxin. The best way to visualize its action is to think of it as a molecular vandal released into the pristine, highly organized city of your brain. It is intensely reactive, and it immediately begins to bind to everything it touches: proteins, the fats that make up your cell membranes, and even your DNA. These unwanted chemical bonds are called byproducts, and they are like molecular graffiti, scrambling the instructions on your genetic code and deforming essential proteins so they can no longer do their jobs. But this vandal does more than just deface things. It starts fires. This process triggers a massive cascade of what we call reactive oxygen species, creating profound oxidative stress. This is like a chemical fire at the cellular level, and it specifically targets the mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside every neuron. Starved of energy, the neuron can't function and eventually dies. Finally, the damage becomes embedded in your very genetics through a process called DNA methylation. This vandal rewrites the brain's maintenance manual, attaching chemical locks to your genes that silence their ability to create memories, learn new information, and repair damage. It's a devastating two-pronged attack, poisoning the cell in the short term, and epigenetically silencing its protective mechanisms in the long term. Now, as a physician, I don't make these statements lightly. We base our understanding on rigorous clinical evidence. One of the most definitive studies on this topic came from a joint effort by researchers at Oxford and Cambridge, who analyzed the UK Biobank data. This is one of the most powerful medical datasets in the world. They looked at multimodal MRI brain scans from over 36,000 middle-aged, generally healthy adults. By carefully controlling for variables like age, sex, and smoking status, they were able to isolate the precise physical impact of alcohol. The results, published in Nature Communications, were unequivocal and, frankly, changed my perspective on so-called moderate drinking. They found a direct, dose-dependent loss of gray matter volume across the brain. The more a person drank, the more their brain had physically shrunk. Crucially, this wasn't just in heavy drinkers. The damage was clearly visible even in those consuming just 1 to 2 drinks per day. This physical atrophy directly contradicts the old narrative about the Mediterranean diet, where a glass of red wine was seen as a health tonic. While some studies pointed to minor cardiovascular benefits from compounds like resveratrol in wine, the overwhelming evidence now shows that these are completely eclipsed by the massive, non-negotiable neurodegenerative risk from the ethanol itself.
Quick pause. Did you know only 20% of you watching are actually subscribed? If this content...
The cost to your brain's architecture is simply too high. When we look at large-scale epidemiological data, the conclusion is stark. Researchers estimate that systematically reducing alcohol consumption could prevent up to 16% of all dementia cases globally. The evidence is clear: alcohol accelerates brain aging. Based on this evidence, the conversation in my clinic has changed. The only truly safe dose of a Group 1 carcinogen is 0. That is the unambiguous medical truth. However, for patients who choose to continue drinking, my focus shifts to a strategy of aggressive harm reduction. The single most effective tool is maximizing metabolic clearance. Public health authorities, like the NHS, recommend incorporating several drink-free days each week. The biological reason for this is to give your liver's enzymatic systems, particularly the aldehyde dehydrogenase enzyme, time to recover and fully clear the acetaldehyde backlog before it can cause permanent damage. Beyond that, here is a practical protocol. First, never drink on an empty stomach. Food, particularly protein and fat, slows the absorption of alcohol from the gut, reducing the peak concentration that hits your brain. Second, support the detoxification pathways. This means supplementing with B vitamins, especially folate and B12, which are cofactors for enzymes that process neurotoxic byproducts. What most people get wrong is believing the type of alcohol matters. They'll say, "I only drink expensive organic wine." But your brain cells cannot tell the difference between ethanol from a cheap beer or a $200 bottle of scotch. The mechanism of damage from acetaldehyde is identical. The one actionable change you can make today is to implement at least 3 to 4 consecutive alcohol-free days per week to allow for systemic recovery. From a physician's viewpoint, the most critical concept here is something we call cognitive reserve. I want you to think of your healthy brain tissue as a retirement fund for your mind. Throughout your youth and middle age, you build up this reserve of healthy neurons and connections. Every drink is a small, early withdrawal from that fund. You may not feel the loss in your 30s or 40s, but you are depleting the very capital you will desperately need in your 70s and 80s to withstand the inevitable challenges of cognitive aging, injury, or illness. While it's true the brain has remarkable neuroplasticity, the ability to heal and rewire itself once the toxic insult is removed, this healing is not perfect. It's more like forming scar tissue. The original, elegant architecture is gone, and while function can be restored, the resilience is diminished. The conversation around alcohol needs to fundamentally shift. We need to challenge the assumption that we are debating a harmless cultural pastime. The real question isn't, how much can I safely drink? The clinically accurate question is, how much of my cognitive future am I willing to trade for a drink tonight?
If you found this helpful, subscribe to Dr. Sanchez LM and hit that notification bell. Together, we make health